Well, good evening. We want to thank you so much for coming this evening to our information session on how we can get involved in the refugee situation. For those that don't know me, I'm Pastor Jeff DeYoung. I'm the new lead pastor here at Hillsborough Baptist Church. Wasn't expecting applause, but thank you. It's going to be my privilege in a moment to introduce to you Julie Sentner. Julie and I have known each other for a number of years, and it's great to have her here to share with us. But could we just have a word of prayer to begin? Father, we thank you so much for this opportunity to come together to learn more about making a difference in the larger world that you've given us. And we pray that you would allow us to have open ears and hearts, that you'd help us to ask good questions and to be receptive to the information Julie has for us this evening. Lord, we want to learn tonight about what we can do. And Lord, at the same time, ask good questions to discover what we cannot do. So we are just being honest with ourselves and with you. We pray that in Jesus' name. Amen. So Julie is here to prepare us for this conversation, and she is a member of our convention council at this time, so she's very involved at the larger level. She's been working with Paul for a little while, I guess, on this, because Paul Carline, who's our, what's his official title now, Julie? He's the Associate Executive Minister in charge of,
I can't remember.
What's that? Intercultural.
That's it.
It's a fancy title, that's why I can't remember it. But Paul's an amazing fellow, spent a number of years overseas, and the problem is he is so busy because at this point, either individually or in cooperation with others, Julie was telling me there's about 70 churches that have asked about getting involved. Isn't that exciting? And so they're fast approaching the 50 family target that they wanted to do to help, which is just amazing to already be in that place so quickly. But Julie's going to be sharing with us. Julie herself was a missionary in Pakistan for 7 or 8 years before she came to Canada. She's a member of Seaside Baptist Church, and Paul has trained her to come and share what he has. So she's going to be sharing on his behalf, and she's going to come and give this presentation for a moment, spend a little time with us, and then there'll be a chance for Q&A after. So if you have questions, if you want to formulate those, jot them down if you have something to write on, because we're going to come around with the mic and you'll have a chance to ask your questions tonight. We want to get as much information out of this and take advantage of having Julie here tonight. I do want to say a special thank you to a couple folks, to Amy and to Dean, who have really run with this and worked together with other groups in the church to make sure that this could come together for tonight. They really have a passion and a burden for this need, and so if you could thank Amy and Dean tonight, it's really because of them. So, what's that? Okay. Who do we have represented? Who do we know? Anglican? Great to have you. Awesome. Great to have you guys. Yeah. And I just met you, and I've forgotten your name already, from another church. Weren't you United? There's another one from down the shore, I thought. I met somebody earlier. Anyway, it's just great to have you folks here tonight and see what we can do together. I'm going to give it over to Julie, and she's going to lead us for the rest of the session tonight.
Thank you, and thank you. I'm excited to be here and to talk about the refugee situation. I'm also pleased the Blue Jays are not playing tonight. Don't want to compete with that, even though it was a good game, right? So we have this huge crisis that has come about so quickly, and the biggest crisis since World War II. We have a country of Syria, and half the people in Syria, half of them over 5 years, are no longer living in their homes. I can't even imagine this. You know, if you took Canada and said that in 5 years' time, half of us would not be living in our homes, half of us would have to flee for our lives because of bombs falling, because of threat of rape or murder or whatever. It's hard to even get your head around the fact that such a tragedy, such a huge tragedy, can happen so quickly. So we're here to think about this, and I'd like us to see the first slide. We're going to be working together as groups to help in this crisis. And just before we talk about sponsorship, I want to talk about the fact that a real way, a very good way to help in this crisis is to send money out to countries like Lebanon, where these people are living in refugee camps and where the conditions are basically intolerable. They don't have enough food, they don't have enough medical care. But we have, here you can see the Lebanese Society for Educational and Social Development. We're working with them through CBM to send money so that relief can arrive there. There's lots of other agencies you can send money through, and the government has promised to match that until the end of this year, at least until the end of this year. So I come from the Convention of Atlantic Baptist Churches, but we're working with all these groups to try and bring help. If we can just turn next, please. What is our response to the Syrian refugee crisis? So we see in 2015 people fleeing, getting on boats, risking their lives because they know that if they stay in refugee camps where they've been for a few years, they have no chance of employment. They have no chance for proper schooling. So it's hopeless for them. They can't go back into Syria. Their choice is stay where there's no education, there's no work, or risk my life to get on a boat where I might be killed. So, you know, that's no choice, is it? These people are refugees. They didn't ever plan to be refugees. This wasn't a choice they were offered. Their lives were at risk and they fled. They can't go back. But we could offer them, through sponsorship, another option. We could sponsor them and bring them to Canada, where they would have hope of a new life, hope of a much better life. Next one, please. So as I've said, this has happened incredibly quickly. We had the Arab Spring in March of 2011. It started with very peaceful protests, but it soon escalated to civil war. And basically, it escalated so that by 2013, we had chemical weapons being used. It's an absolute disaster. Next, please. We all know about ISIS. They're part of the problem, but they're only a very small part, actually. The civil war is claiming more lives than ISIS is taking. And Russia has just stepped into the picture. I don't think Russia is going to lessen the number of refugees flooding out of Syria. I think it's going to increase the number of refugees flooding out. We have 4 million people now, mostly in Turkey, Lebanon, and Jordan. There are 7 million people who are internally displaced within Syria. That means they've left their homes, but we can't sponsor them. We can only sponsor people that are in countries like Turkey, Lebanon, and Jordan, because they're in these camps and they can't get work or anything. We can't sponsor someone who's gone to Europe. Once they're in Europe, they're considered to be in a country where they can get work, etc. So the only people we can sponsor are those in Turkey, Lebanon, and Jordan, Egypt, perhaps. That's key, because sometimes I'm being asked, well, I know this Syrian lady and her cousin has fled for his or her life, but they're still in Syria. Their life is in danger, their life is really hard, but we cannot sponsor them while they're still in Syria. They have to be outside Syria. Next, please. I think, just on a note, I think 7,000 people at least have lost their lives in the Mediterranean so far, fleeing. It could well be more, but I believe it's at least that many. So 7 million people internally displaced within Syria, 4 million as refugees. Lebanon. Lebanon is an amazing country. It's a really small country. I can't get over the fact that 1 in 4 people in this country are refugees. It's huge. And you know, the churches there are really small. They're the same size as my church, just 50 people in. And there's about 32 churches there, and they are doing an absolutely amazing job. By history, the country of Lebanon and Syria have not really got on over the years. These have not been countries that have seen eye to eye. So when these refugees flooded into Lebanon, there was a lot of, what are we going to do? We don't like Syrians, and they're Muslims, and, But, the churches there got over their fear, and they saw that these people that were coming into their country with huge numbers were people just like them who wanted a peaceful life, and they have fed them, they have clothed them, they have helped them with schooling, and I just think they're an inspiration to us. And that goes back to where I was saying at the beginning, we don't have to, there's more than one way to help in this situation. Yes, sponsorship's good, but we could send some money to the churches in Lebanon, or we can do both. You've probably heard of Paradise, the church there that sponsored a family, a mother and 5 daughters. It was in the news in the summer. Well, they raised so much money for that, that's all paid off, so they're now sending the rest of the money over to Lebanon. So you can do both, it's all good. Next, please. There's a lot of Christians that have been affected. They've been particularly targeted in this disaster. There's no question about that. The number of Christians left living in Syria and Iraq is just a fraction of what it was. So there are some churches that are saying, we would particularly like to help a Christian family, and others who are saying, we just want to help someone. Every church is going to come to a different answer for that. Next one, please. My apologies, this slide is out of date. And we have an election coming up next week, so what's the point of making a new slide? Because it's going to be really out of date then. The parties keep changing their minds. All I can say is I think each of the parties is pitiful in how many refugees they want to bring in. I think last year we offered permanent home to less than 1% of the total number of new refugees forced into being refugees. We are offering homes to very few. Our numbers are getting less and less and less as each year goes by. I think our government, personally, I think our government could do way more in offering homes. And I think as they see the response, there's a groundswell in Canada now, this hopefully will encourage them to take more refugees. We're the only country in the world that has private sponsorship. This is something we can be proud of. We sponsored over 60,000 people, the boat people. And that was good for Canada, and it was good for the refugees. And I think 2015 could be marked not only by a disaster, but by a huge response from churches here in America, in Europe, all over, opening their hearts. And communities, not just churches, but communities, opening their hearts to people whose lives are, just so messed up at the moment. Next one, please. Okay, so we're not going to solve the problems over there. We're not, but we're going to solve the problems for a family, perhaps. Next one, please. It's about helping people that are vulnerable, people who have no choice but to run for their lives. And next one, please. So, sponsorship, what does it look like? You're going to, if you go this route, you're going to identify, apply for, welcome and settle a refugee. This is talking about covering all the sponsorship costs for 12 months. This is if we do a private sponsorship. We're going to get into the different types of sponsorship. I'm going to mention briefly what those are. I don't want you to be too weighed down with, oh, there's 3 different types of sponsorship and we can't do sponsorship unless we decide which one we're going to do. I think the question you need to ask first is sponsorship right for us? And then jump in and you'll find out which type of sponsorship is the one that's appropriate for you. Private sponsorship is when someone in your community or someone in, say, another church or in convention office or someone in the multicultural association or someone says, I know someone who needs to come, who wants to come as a refugee. So you have their name and their family, and you will be completely responsible for paying for everything that's involved there. The big advantage of this is that they already have contacts here in Canada. They already have a language base. They have, they want to come here because they have family in Moncton or Hillsborough or wherever that you're connecting them up to. It does take longer to process a private refugee because you're starting from ground zero, so to speak. The refugee office has done nothing in the processing them, so you could be looking at a year or even more, although the government is telling us they're speeding it up. So that's a private sponsorship. Next one, please. Anyone can privately sponsor someone. Our convention is what's known as a SAR, a sponsorship agreement holder, and I feel that God has put us here for this time. There are only there's 90 sponsorship agreement holders in the whole of Canada, but in New Brunswick there's very few. And if you are a sponsorship agreement holder, it means that the government has already said, okay, you folk have the money. We don't have to worry about whether you have the money. You have the know-how. So you're good to go to sponsor someone. You don't have to prove that to us. If you are working without a sponsorship agreement holder, then you're going to have to send in proof, your tax forms to show that you've got the money. You're going to have to jump through a lot more hoops. It's still possible to do. I don't want to say it's not possible, but it's a lot harder. So I believe personally that we are here for this time because we are sponsorship agreement holders and we are working with lots of denominations now and signing agreements with them so they can sponsor people through the convention, like the Anglican Church, the Wesleyan Church. We still have to supervise a little because this is a legal responsibility. When you agree to sponsor someone, you are legally committing to fund them for the year, to settle them into Canada. So, it is a legal thing, and that's important to keep in mind. Next one, please. Motivations. Why are we doing this? I personally believe we sponsor refugees because it's the right thing to do. And there's a list of verses on one of the sheets I put out at the back. Most of those sheets are all about how to sponsor someone, what to do, what are the stages. But there's one with all verses that will talk to you about foreigners or aliens or whatever your verse says. And if I look at Leviticus, for instance, it says here, when you harvest the grain in your land, don't harvest the grain in the corners of your fields or gather what is left after you've finished. Don't harvest your vineyard a second time or pick up fallen grapes. Leave them for poor people and foreigners. I am the Lord your God. And then further on it says, never mistreat a foreigner living in your land. Foreigners living among you will be like your own people. Love them as you love yourself, because you were foreigners living in Egypt. I am the Lord your God. So the reason to do this is because what God has done for us. That's the bottom line. He rescued us, and we need to have God's heart in this world. And I think sponsoring people is one of the ways. It's not the only way, but it is one of the way that we can have God's heart by offering life to these people. Next, please. This is really important, this slide. This is probably, to me, one of the most important things to think about. What are our expectations and what is the refugees' expectations? Because if they're not fulfilled, we're going to have some very, at least, disappointed people, worst, very angry people. If your expectation is that you're going to bring this person here or this family here and they're going to sit on the pews, probably not going to happen, even if they're Christian. I have to tell you, Christian in terms of Syrian is not evangelical Christian. So it may or may not happen. Muslim, probably not, could. You know, there have been a lot of conversions in Lebanon. A whole lot of Muslims have come to Christ because they've seen the love that Christians have. It's different than anything they've experienced. But don't do this because you're expecting that. Don't even do this because you're expecting them to like you, to be your buddies, because these people have been traumatized. These people have been through awful, horrible experiences. They may not trust you. You know, they may not even understand what sponsorship is. They may not understand that you have foregone some of your pleasures in order to put money to bring them here. So they may not be forever grateful. They may love you. They may embrace you, want to live here forever. They may move to Edmonton. You know, I don't know what's going to happen. So do it because it's the right thing to do, not because your refugee family is going to do this and this. And it's the same when your refugee family comes here. They won't have a clue what Canadian life is like. And one of the first things you're going to have to do is put their expectations onto a realistic level. When I came to Canada, believe me, I didn't know what life was like in the winter here. So I can imagine that these poor people don't know what life is like in the winter here. I came from England. So, you know, expectations, you know, it's the same when we parent, isn't it? You know, if what we're expecting of our kids and what they're expecting to do are two different levels, then we get clashes in the home. We'll have clashes and disappointments, frustrations, if we're not doing it for, you know, because we feel it's the right thing, not because we're wanting anything from these refugees. It's got to be, thank you, it's got to be no commitment. I had a business company come to me and they said, can we sponsor someone? You know, meaning we need an employee. And I said, well, you know, that's a little bit hard, isn't it? This person is an adult in their own right. Why should you tell them what job they have to do, you know, in order to earn the right to live in Canada? When these people come, they will be permanent residents. When I came to Canada, I was a permanent resident. So that meant I could do everything except vote and hold a Canadian passport. These refugees will be the same. They'll have had their own life experiences, that they bring their own dreams, and, you know, somehow we have to work everything out so that, you know, it looks good for them. But I just think this is an exciting... I don't want to put you off by anything I say. I just want to be realistic about it, you know, and make sure that our expectations are right, because I passionately believe in sponsoring people, but I just think it's only fair to say, you know, these people are hurting a lot, and, you know, they may not behave in the way that we're thinking they should to start with anyway. But many of them go on and form real friendships and you know, this sort of thing. So it's good. Okay, the next one. Different types of sponsorship. Now, I've covered private sponsorship. That's the last one. That's when, that's when you know someone, and that's when you're going to pay everything, and that's going to take a bit longer. Now, the blended visa one, which is the one in the middle, is very interesting. These people are referred by immigration. They've asked to come to Canada, And they've already, this changed 2 weeks ago, so this has really thrown me. The government has changed some of the guidelines. They are in the process of being screened, so they'll have their security and health done very quickly, and the government will pay part of their costs. And you can access these people. There's a website that Paul, we have in the office, and you can go on this site and you can see, yes, there's this family with so many people in it, and they want to come to Canada, and you can get a little bit of information about them. Because the government now is pushing so many people through, because we want Syrians to come, don't we? The problem is there's less information about these people than there were. But this is a really good program, and we can go this route, and they will be here quicker. They could be here in 3-4 months' time. And I have to tell you, on this list are people from other countries than Syria. There are people that have been waiting 6 and 7 years. There are people from Afghanistan. There are people from Pakistan. There are people from the African countries, and these are all heartbreaking stories as well. So some churches may want to consider, or some communities may want to say, well, it doesn't have to be a Syrian. Syrians are in the news. Syrians are desperate, but these other people are desperate as well. So just to let you know, that's an option. There's a lot of actually single men on this list as well. So you can actually look at this list. Just briefly, the joint assisted sponsorship. These are people with huge issues. They're going to have a lot more of their expenses covered by the government. But you're talking about major trauma, major health issues. You're going to need a team that's very special. But still, there are jazz families out there that need sponsorship. Next one, please. The cost. People will always want to know about the cost, which is really legitimate. If you take a family of 4, you're going to need $20,000 for the 12 months and $7,000 for the startup costs. You're going to give them a budget. You're not going to pay their bills for them, right? So you're going to give them a budget each month to live off. If they come with the blended program, half of that 12,000 will be covered. So if it's a blended one and it's a family of 4, you need 17,000 plus the government will give 10,000. Probably not a good idea to give too much more than that, because if at the end of the year they haven't found work, this is the amount of income assistance that they'll have to live off. Okay, the 20,000. So if a church is feeling really generous, or a community group, let me tell you something our government does for these poor people. It says to them, your priority in the first year is to learn the language. We've lent you the money for your airfare. We've lent you the money for your health test before you came. So we'd like you to start paying it back, and we're charging interest after 6 months. Welcome to Canada, the land of debt. So I think this is a disgrace. I can't tell you what a disgrace I think it is. But some groups are saying, we'd like to help our individual or our family pay off their plane tickets. There's no legal obligation for you to do that. That's not required. This is a legal obligation to have this money to pay for it. You have to have that. You can give some of it in kind, though. So if you have furniture or someone has a house that they want to give rather than take rent, not give, but let the people live in it, then this can be, and you can give up to 40% in kind. So there's all different ways to do it. Startup costs are things like clothes, winter clothes to wear, telephone, computer, whatever they're going to need are your startup costs. What's going to be needed by your refugee is partly going to be determined by where they live, I think. Because if your family is going to live here, you've got to think about transport. If they live in Moncton, then probably you're going to think about a bus pass, are you? You know, so these are things you're going to have to think through. I know Granby Westfield are talking about sponsoring someone, but they're putting them in St. John on the bus route. There isn't a right and a wrong. I'm just saying there are things to think through. You know, there's lots of possibilities. Next one, please. One of the exciting things I've found is people working together to do this. I really have been happy. And I'm happy tonight that there's people from different churches and different backgrounds saying we want to be part of this. And I think this is so positive. So what can your group look like? And what do they have to do? Next one, please. You're going to meet together, discuss whether you're going to do this. It's going to be a legal commitment, so you have to have someone to sign. And you need a team leader. You need about 8 people in your team. And then each of those will have jobs. So if someone was, say, responsible for furniture, there'd be one person on the team looking after furniture, but they would know key people in the community that knew about furniture, say, or someone else was in charge of finding accommodation. You know, it doesn't mean they have to do it completely by themselves, but you'd probably have about 8 people on your team that would meet very, very regularly. Fundraising, you're going to need someone to do that. That's a big task, isn't it? They're going to have to involve a lot of people in fundraising. There's always going to the airport to meet them and settling them in. Next one, please. The first month is going to be really, really busy. You are going to be with this family or this individual every day for the first month, probably. The first thing you have to do is get their medical card, get their SIN, you've got to take them to the bank, you've got to get the schooling, you've got to get language. Multicultural Association's really good at helping you with language. You're going to have to work on language because this person may not have good English or French, you know. So that's going to be key. Doctors, medical. If you're privately sponsored, you're responsible for covering medicines, dental and eye for adults, but not for children. If you're going with the blended program, the government will cover that. All refugees will get their Medicare card when they arrive. You've got to do this, you've got employment to think about, friendship to think about, all these things. As I said previously, employment is not their first priority in the year. Language learning is their first priority. But some work may be good as well. They can earn up to 50% of their, say if it's a family of 4, of the 20,000. If it's over that, then there's a clawback thing, you know, the Canadian government, you know, sort of idea. Okay, I think that's most of what I wanted to share with you, but I'd be really happy to answer questions now, or if I don't know the answers, to get them for you. Yes.
And it's about 7 or 8 people? Or?
It will look different in each church. Yes, I think there's some lists at the back of structures. There's no reason why it can't be as you want it to be. It's got to be an efficient group, though, hasn't it, that meets... you know, regularly, and you know who the leader is. That's the really important person, and that you have a signature. And I should tell you now, if this is a church sponsorship, we do ask that the whole church has a meeting and decides this as a church, so that we know who is owning this sponsorship. We really need to know that anyway. And so we're really asking that there's a members meeting and everyone will own it, even if you'll then have a committee that will work on this. Yeah. Can I just address one thing that I should have perhaps mentioned? Every meeting I've been to so far, someone has mentioned terrorists, and we're feeling uneasy about bringing Muslims here. And this is a valid question. This is a fair question, All I can say is that our government is really screening these people very, very thoroughly. They're not cutting back in any way, even though they're speeding up the process. They are being thoroughly screened. And I think we have to put fear aside and open our hearts to these people. That's what I personally think, and I think we'll find that they're just like us.
I know language training is pretty important. Could you comment on the availability of language training in this area? As if we brought someone to Hillsborough, where would they get their language training?
I think the Multicultural Society in Moncton would be a huge, huge help. I think you'd also want to approach the school board if they had children and ask what was available through the school board. And you'd want to start getting translators in place as soon as possible. You can speak to these people via Skype before they come. So how cool to have a translator and to introduce yourself before they arrive. But yes, translation is really key. I know in Little Charlotte County, where I come from, we have an awesome multicultural association, and they promised me they will step forward and help with language. So I'm getting a nod from the back that what I'm saying is right. Yeah.
I'm just wondering, I don't know a lot about Syria. Are there a lot of English-speaking people there who would likely, or French-speaking? Or
there's a lot of well-educated people from Syria.
Yeah.
A lot. I'm not getting the impression that many of them have a lot of English. So I don't know. Some of them will. Some of them will have a little French. Some of them will have a little English, but I think it won't be the majority of them.
I just wonder if, people living in Moncton who are unilingual English often find they have trouble getting work. And to bring a person in from, say, Syria, where they would have to learn 2 languages in order to become highly employable. I just wonder if that's the right place to bring people in from, or whether we should be looking at other countries' refugees.
Yes, there's a lot of refugees from other countries, and what I'm seeing is often they're less well educated, and so they would probably be happy to work in a rural environment. I'm thinking in the fishing where we are, but the language would still be the issue. But a lot of these people will not stay in the Maritimes. But the Maritimes is a fabulous place for a start. It's a peaceful place. It's a beautiful place. They'll see community working at its best. They'll start learning one of the languages. They won't learn both. And my son works in Edmonton. He couldn't stay here. So, realistically, a lot of these refugees are not going to stay in the Maritimes, but I think we could give them a good start.
It's been my experience when I've traveled to Europe or It's been my experience when I've traveled to Europe or other areas that it's very common to speak many languages. I mean, some Europeans I know speak gosh, 5, 6 languages. And so I think that language training would probably come fairly easy to them because...
And you may be right. The problem is the government has been so slow in processing the Syrians. There's been so few that have appeared on the website until this week, really, that it's been hard to get a grasp of what their language is, whereas I've been able to look at what the language of the African refugees is, etc. But you may be right, some of these may have English, you know, and we may find that, but yeah, the children will learn quickly, won't they? They'll learn really quickly.
Some of you may not realize that this is not a new thing for us. We brought 2 Vietnamese families into Hillsborough and Riverside, Albert. And it was a wonderful thing. Teachers I remember one teacher taught English. We fell in love with these people. They did not stay, but they do visit people here still. So it's not a new thing, and we don't have to worry, I don't think, about a language. I don't think we do. I really believe that they will go where they feel they need to, or they will stay, and they'll make it work.
Thank you. Thank you.
Also, there are, in the schools in the Moncton area now, there are many children who are speaking not English or French. We have a large segment of tutors that are trained to work with these children, and they're from Korea, they're a variety of languages, and the children have no English at all when they come in. But within the first year that they're here, they're fairly fluent. They sit in regular classrooms where they hear English all day, and they have special tutors that work with them. So these the children at least will have a really big heads up when they get here.
Yeah, thank you. There's a lot of literature at the back, I think, that will answer the questions. And I know in Convention Office we are really pleased to answer questions. Sometimes churches and groups just have to jump in, even if they don't have all the answers. We tend in the West to, you know, we want all the T's crossed and the I's dotted before we'll agree to do something, you know. And we do need to educate ourselves on this. Each group needs to learn about this and read about it, and there's websites, there's down there that you can find the information. But sometimes, you know, if it's the right things, you just have to get started. And what we're finding is one church or one community group that's done this is then the resource person or the resource group, I should say, for another group that's doing it. So if you decide to do this, you would then become a resource probably for someone else. And we're hoping to start a Facebook page, you know, questions and answers that sponsors have, this sort of idea, so that there'll be this dialogue going along, which I think is a really good idea.
Julie, I just wanted to say thank you so much for coming in, for everyone here that came tonight. Clearly you're here because your heart has been stirred and touched by what's happened in the media and what's going on in the world. And I believe here in Albert County and New Brunswick, we have a really awesome opportunity to allow people, like Marion said, to get a starting point. They may not stay, but we really have an awesome opportunity to make great impacts and maybe rippling effects for other communities to say, you know what, we're a little church, we're, you know, little Hillsborough, but look what they did. You know, and it could speak very loud to the rest of our country, the rest of our community, that not only do we want to help local people, but we can help on the global scene. And this whole thing started here in Hillsborough. It's interesting because I was talking with Pastor Jeff, and he may mention this himself, but this was stirring in his heart before he had gotten here. And as I was speaking with Paul Carline, Paul had said, you know, Amy, it's really cool that you got in contact with me, because I've already been talking in the past with Pastor Jeff, and it started with myself, Charlene, Melody Land, Nancy, Mr. Whitmore, quite a few people, Pastor Dean, all people that not really sure what we could do, what we could bring to the table, but just knew that there is a reason why we were placed here in Canada. We have an obligation to love our neighbors, love our enemies, and an obligation to do something. And we're a group of people, weren't really sure what we could bring to the table, what we could do, but we came together and we started a dialogue and we started to talk. And I appreciate you folks coming out tonight, because that's what it's all about. It's about talking and getting it out there. There's a need. We have the ability to help. So, sir, I mentioned this a couple Sundays ago, but I've often thought in the past, what would I have done during World War II? Would I have helped the Jews that came over on the boats and they were sent back and they weren't helped? And many of you may have seen the little boy that had drowned, who was part of the boat people, that was on the beach and had drowned and had died. And there's been many, thousands, that have died and haven't even survived the boat rides. I was once told by Les Peters, which many of you are familiar with. Les said, when I was a teenager, I thought, that's it, I'm leaving Canada, I'm going to Guatemala, I'm going to be a missionary, I'm going to stay there. And Les looked at me and said, Amy, you're more than welcome, but I have to ask you, there's a reason why God placed you in Canada. And what is it that you can offer in Canada? So I guess I would venture to ask you the same. There's a reason why we're here in Canada. What can we offer? What can we bring to the table? And I believe it's quite a bit. But anyway, I didn't really have a question, but I wanted to say thank you, because I sensed your heart, and I hope you can get a sense of our heart too, that we want to help.
Yes.
Certainly.
Are there any other questions? Lots of questions. There's going to be lots of questions as you process. You know, it's funny, I don't know why it just came to mind only just now, but I was thinking, you know, even listening to Amy and what Julie's had to share with us, we talked about the families often don't end up here. But let me tell you a little part of my story, my family's story. See, my family left Holland after World War II, my mom's family, because there was no life for them there after the war. And when they arrived in Canada, my grandparents, and at the time I think it was 8 kids, ended up being 11 total, their sponsor had canceled. And so this family with no English, and at the time no translators in the immigration office, landed at Pier 21 and spent about a week in lockup because they had no place for them. And then were sent, they were put on a train, they didn't know what was going on, didn't know where they were going, they were put on a train to southern Ontario and sent away from the Maritimes. And then they grew up, and then my mom had me, and I came back. And we don't know what investment we can make today. When it's going to come back. But I think about the strangeness that God works. You know, he set this up how many years ago? That we're talking about this today. And in a way, my family, although they didn't start out refugees, they fled a land they couldn't find employment or have homes or build a family or raise a family in. And thought they had help. And when they got here, the help wasn't what it was supposed to be. But Canada stepped up. And as a Christian, I think we need to do this. As a Canadian, I'm proud that we have a history of doing this. And I don't think we have a choice but to at least explore what we can do. Go ahead, it's on.
Is it on? We also have this piece of land because of a Holland survivor. Miss Dora Brahm, she came over in the war, and she stayed. And she learned English, her and her husband learned English on their own, and they worked hard, and they stayed here in Hillsborough, and she's still here.
Wow. We know there's lots to learn.
What's amazing to me is how quickly this can happen, Jeff. I mean, I've known churches, groups, and they've had a meeting, they've passed it in the church. As soon as they've got an idea that their funds are there, they've got pledges or whatever they've done, they're applying for their missionary and they're refugees, sorry. They're refugee. And, you know, this can happen quickly. This doesn't have to be a long, drawn-out process. You probably wouldn't have someone for Christmas, but you would have them before the winter's out. if you wanted to, you know.
I hope it's not like last winter.
I was talking to someone from Grand Bay, and their aim was to have this poor family come before the winter was out. So, but anyway, that was one of the things that surprised me in learning the process, was that particularly the blended visa ones, the ones that the government is going to pay half, can be here fairly quickly, which is a good thing, because otherwise you're left, you know, not knowing quite what to do. I think it's good. You know.
And are the blended ones, just so I understand, are they in a refugee camp?
Yes.
Also?
They've asked to come to Canada. I think most of them are in refugee camps, but not necessarily so. But they're in the countries around Syria. So they're in Lebanon, they're in Jordan, they're in Turkey, and they're not able to work, and they're asking to come to Canada. And so, you know, they've been processed as we speak now.
Yeah. So the conversation has begun. And that's the goal for tonight. This is not a decision time, but it is a time to challenge every one of us to be praying, to be continuing the conversation. We have a group of people that are already excited about seeing something happen. We want to see the rest of our prayer meeting tonight. We want to see our missions team. We want to see our deacons. This conversation is going to go to the next level. And we're going to explore this together. Not because we know what we're going to do, but we know what we should do. And the only question is how we can get involved, not if we should be. Okay? And so we just want to say thank you to Julie tonight.
You're welcome.
If you would thank her.
You're welcome. I've enjoyed it very much,
Yeah.
and I look forward to hearing from you, Jeff.